Money can't buy class. But Victoria Marshall was determined to prove otherwise. Standing in her designer wedding dress that cost more than my car, she'd orchestrated what she called the society event of the season. Funny how quickly my father's modest country club wedding had transformed into a showcase of excess once she took over the planning. My name is Olivia Bennett, and until 6 months ago, I was the VP of Commercial Lending at First Capital Bank, the same bank that was about to fund my father and his new wife's dream business venture. Life has a way of coming full circle, especially when people forget who you really are. I still remember the day Dad met Victoria at his hardware store. She'd walked in looking for authentic vintage tools to decorate her luxury real estate office. Back then, she'd been perfectly pleasant, even complimenting my financial expertise when Dad proudly mentioned my banking career. A banker? How practical, she'd said with that same smile she'd later used to cut me down at every opportunity. What changed? Simple. She discovered I wasn't just any banker. I was the daughter of the man she intended to marry. Suddenly, my career was quaint and limited. After all, in Victoria's world, women of status didn't work in finance. They ran charities and planned galas. Darling, she'd say to Dad, loud enough for me to hear, isn't it time Olivia found something more suitable? The banking world is so harsh for a young woman. Dad would just nod, already caught in her spell. My strong-willed father, who'd raised me alone after Mom died, who'd encouraged me to pursue my dreams in finance, was slowly transforming into Victoria's puppet. The wedding planning became her weapon of choice. Every decision, every detail was calculated to remind me of my place, or rather, the place she thought I deserved. The seating chart is rather complicated, she'd say during planning meetings. We have the governor's wife attending and several state senators. We need to be selective about table assignments. I watched my place card move further and further from the main tables, until finally, a week before the wedding, I overheard her talking to her wedding planner. Put Olivia in the kitchen entrance. She'll understand. It's where the help usually sits. The help. That's what I'd become in my own father's wedding. The daughter he'd raised alone, who'd graduated top of her class, who'd become the youngest VP in First Capital's history, reduced to the help. But Victoria had made one crucial mistake. She'd been so busy orchestrating her perfect wedding that she'd forgotten to check who was handling her business loan application. 3 months ago, she convinced Dad to sell his hardware store, his pride and joy for 30 years, to fund their new venture, a high-end interior design and home staging business. Victoria's vintage ventures would cater to the elite circles she so desperately wanted to join. The loan application had landed on my desk through pure coincidence. I could have recused myself, should have probably, but curiosity made me read it, and what I read made my blood run cold. Victoria's previous business ventures weren't nearly as successful as she claimed. 3 failed companies in 5 years, each time leaving unpaid debts and angry investors. She'd hidden this from Dad, using her charm and a series of LLCs to mask her track record. I tried to tell him, tried to show him the evidence, but Victoria had already poisoned that well. Olivia's just jealous, she told him. She can't stand seeing you happy, seeing you succeed without her help. Dad had patted my hand like I was still a child. Sweetheart, I know change is hard, but Victoria knows what she's doing. This business will secure our future. Our future. As if the life we built together meant nothing. I'd approved the loan anyway, signed all the paperwork, dotted every I, crossed every T. Victoria had been triumphant, not even bothering to read the fine print. After all, why would she? She'd won. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early, wearing the simple blue dress that Victoria had deemed appropriate for my position. The country club was transformed into her vision of luxury. Crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, ice sculptures. I found my place card exactly where I'd expected. A small table near the kitchen doors, hidden behind a large floral arrangement. Far from Dad, far from the important guests. Victoria spotted me as she made her final rounds before the ceremony. Her smile was pure poison. "The kitchen's where you belong," she smirked, adjusting her diamond necklace. "Wouldn't want to embarrass the family." I nodded quietly and opened the banking app on my phone, the same app I'd helped design during my tenure at First Capital, the same app that gave me access to every loan approval in the system. Victoria floated away, secure in her victory, never noticing my small smile. She had no idea that while she'd been planning her perfect wedding, I'd been planning something too. You see, there's something they don't teach you in banking school. Timing is everything. And tomorrow morning, when Victoria and Dad returned from their honeymoon to start their new business venture, they'd learn that lesson the hard way. I tucked my phone away and took my seat by the kitchen doors. In a few hours, Dad would say, "I do" to a woman who'd orchestrated my humiliation. In 24 hours, that same woman would discover that karma has a way of serving revenge on a silver platter. The wedding coordinator began herding guests to their seats. The orchestra struck up the first notes of the wedding march, and I sat quietly, watching it all unfold, knowing that sometimes the best revenge doesn't need an audience. After all, I'd learned from the best. Victoria had taught me that humiliation tastes sweetest when served cold, in front of an audience. Tomorrow, she'd learn what happens when you underestimate the help. The ceremony began, and I watched my father marry a woman who'd torn our relationship apart. But unlike Victoria, I knew something she didn't. This wedding wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The morning after the wedding dawned bright and clear. I sat in my home office, surrounded by documents that would soon shatter Victoria's perfect world. My laptop displayed First Capital Bank's loan management system, a system I'd helped build, and one that still held a few secrets known only to its architects. I took a sip of coffee and began my work. Victoria and Dad were somewhere over the Atlantic, heading to their luxury honeymoon in the Maldives. They had no idea that their dream business was about to crumble before it even began. My phone buzzed. A text from my colleague Michael in risk assessment. "Just reviewed the loan docs like you asked. How did we miss these red flags?" I smiled, remembering how carefully I'd structured everything. "Send the report to compliance." I texted back. Standard protocol. The truth was, we hadn't missed anything. I'd just waited for the perfect moment to discover the irregularities in Victoria's loan application. Timing, as they say, is everything. My desk phone rang. Amanda Torres, head of compliance. "Olivia? We have a situation with the Marshall Bennett loan approval." "Oh?" I kept my voice neutral, professional. "What kind of situation?" "Major discrepancies in the business history section. 3 undisclosed bankruptcies, multiple defaulted loans. How did this get approved?" I could hear her shuffling papers. "And the collateral verification. The property she listed as security. It's already mortgaged to 2 other banks." "That's concerning," I replied, fighting to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "Have you flagged it for immediate review?" "Already done. Given the severity, We're initiating an emergency cancellation. The funds were scheduled for release tomorrow. But now they won't be, I finished. Standard procedure for fraudulent applications. Exactly. I'll need you to sign off on the cancellation since you were the approving officer. I opened the relevant form on my screen, my cursor hovering over the signature line. In this moment, I thought about Dad, about the hardware store he'd sold based on Victoria's promises, about the way he changed since meeting her. Sending the signed forms now, I said, clicking submit. Will you handle the notification, or should I? Given your personal connection, I'll handle it. The notification will go out first thing tomorrow when they return from their honeymoon. Perfect timing. Victoria would walk into her new office space, the one she'd already leased and furnished with Dad's money, only to find that her dream business was dead before it started. After hanging up, I pulled out a thick folder from my desk drawer. Inside were copies of every document Victoria thought she'd successfully hidden: her previous business failures, the unpaid debts, the investors she'd swindled. I'd been collecting them for months, waiting for the right moment. My phone buzzed again, a message from Victoria's daughter, Sophia, who'd been just as cruel as her mother throughout the wedding planning. Mom's so excited about the business. She's already invited all her society friends to the grand opening next month. It's going to be amazing. I didn't respond. Let them plan. Let them dream. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people build their castles in the air, knowing you're about to show them it's all made of sand. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calculated moods. I forwarded Victoria's true business history to every high-end design magazine that had agreed to cover her grand opening. I sent anonymous tips to the society columnists she'd been courting. By the time she returned, her carefully constructed image would be in tatters. That evening, I visited Dad's old hardware store, now empty, the sold sign still hanging in the window. 30 years of honest business, of serving the community, gone because Victoria had convinced him to chase her upscale dreams. My phone lit up with a photo from their honeymoon, Dad and Victoria on a pristine beach, her massive diamond ring prominently displayed. The caption read, "Planning our empire from paradise. Hashtag business goals, hashtag new beginnings." If only she knew. The next morning, I arrived at work early, wanting to be there when everything fell apart. At precisely 9 a.m., the automated system sent out the loan cancellation notice. At 9:05, Victoria's dream officially died. I didn't have to wait long for the reaction. At 9:17, my phone exploded with notifications. First came Victoria's text. All pretense of civility gone. "What have you doing?" Then Sophia. "Mom's hysterical. Fix this now." At 9:25, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail. Some conversations needed to happen in person. At 9:45, Victoria stormed into my office, her designer outfit slightly disheveled, her perfect makeup smeared by angry tears. Dad followed behind her, looking confused and angry. "You vindictive little," Victoria started, but I held up my hand. "Before you continue," I said calmly, "you should know that this meeting is being recorded as per bank policy. Now, how can I help you?" Victoria's face contorted with rage. "You know exactly what you did. You canceled our loan." "No," I corrected her, opening the compliance report on my screen. "The bank canceled your loan due to numerous undisclosed prior bankruptcies and fraudulent collateral claims. Would you like to discuss those?" Dad stepped forward, his face pale. "What bankruptcies? What fraud?" I turned my monitor so he could see. "Victoria's had 3 failed businesses in 5 years, Dad. Each time, she left behind unpaid debts and angry investors. The property she claimed to own free and clear. It's mortgaged to multiple banks. She's lying. Victoria shrieked, but her voice held a note of panic. The documentation is quite clear, I continued, my voice professional and detached. Would you like to see the court records? Or perhaps the complaints filed by your previous investors? Dad sank into a chair, the reality of what he'd done. What she'd convinced him to do, finally hitting home. The store, he whispered. I sold the store. Yes, I said quietly. You did. Victoria's composure cracked completely. This is because of the wedding, isn't it? Because I'd put you in your place. I smiled, the same small smile I'd worn at the wedding. No, Victoria. This is because you committed loan fraud. The fact that you're an awful person is just a bonus. I'll report you, she threatened. I'll have your job. For what? Doing my job. Protecting the bank from fraud? Please go ahead. I'm sure the banking commission would be very interested in your business history. Dad looked between us, 30 years of business reputation crumbling before his eyes. Can we fix this? The loan? No. That's done. Your reputation after associating with a known fraudster. I pulled out a business card. This is David Cohen, the best business attorney I know. You'll meet him. Victoria grabbed her designer bag, her hands shaking. This isn't over. Actually, I said, standing up, it is. Security will escort you out. Standard procedure for fraud cases. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared at my door. Victoria's final humiliation would be walking through the bank's lobby, past the very society people she'd been so desperate to impress. Dad stayed behind, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, Dad, many times. But you didn't want to hear it from your practical daughter who works in that harsh banking world. He flinched at the words, Victoria's words, thrown back at him. The store, he began, is sold, I finished. But not all is lost. I pulled out another folder, my resignation letter from First Capital Bank, along with a business plan I'd spent months preparing. Remember how Mom always said we should open a second location? I asked softly. I've spent the last 6 months negotiating with investors. Real investors, Dad. Not society climbers playing business. His hands trembled as he opened the folder. We can start over, I said. The right way this time. No shortcuts, no get-rich-quick schemes. Just honest business, like you taught me. The security guards were leading Victoria through the lobby now. I could hear her protests echoing down the hallway. Dad looked at the business plan, then at me. Why? Because sometimes, I said, people need to lose everything to remember what really matters. Through my office window, I watched Victoria climb into her luxury car, her dream of social climbing via my father's hard work shattered. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone, it's about exposing who they really are. And sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding something better from the ashes of what was lost. 1 year can change everything. I stood in front of our new store, Bennett and Daughter Hardware and Home, watching the morning sun glint off the freshly painted sign. The grand opening was scheduled for 10 a.m., and already a small crowd had gathered. Inside, Dad was arranging the last display, making sure every tool was perfectly aligned. He'd spent weeks planning the layout, combining the best elements of his old store with modern touches I'd suggested. The result was something neither of us could have created alone. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Socialite Victoria Marshall faces federal charges in investment scheme. I allowed myself a small smile. Karma, it seems, has perfect timing. The past year had been a journey of reconstruction, not just of the business, but of relationships. After the loan cancellation debacle, Dad had filed for annulment, citing Victoria's fraud as grounds. The society pages had a field day with that one. "Ready for this?" Dad asked, joining me at the window. He looked younger somehow. The weight of Victoria's manipulation lifted from his shoulders. "Born ready," I replied, using the same phrase I'd used as a kid when he'd first taught me to use a cash register. The story of Victoria's fraud had spread quickly through our small business community. But something unexpected had happened alongside the scandal. People rallied around Dad. His old customers, the ones who trusted him for decades, came forward with support. Thomas Green, the elderly carpenter who'd been coming to our store for 30 years, had been the first to approach us about investing in the new venture. "Your father taught me everything I know about selecting wood," he'd said, writing out a check. Time to return the favor. Other local business owners followed, not with millions like Victoria had promised, but with honest investments from people who understood the value of integrity over flash. We found the new location, bigger than the old store, but still in the heart of the community, through one of Dad's longtime customers. The renovation had been a community effort, with local contractors offering their services at cost. The interior design, nothing like Victoria's grand plans. Instead of crystal chandeliers and imported marble, we had warm wood finishes and practical layouts. The DIY workshop area I'd always dreamed of adding was ready for its first class next week. 10 minutes until opening, Dad said, checking his watch. Mom's old watch, the one he'd started wearing again after Victoria left. I nodded, remembering another opening day, 25 years ago. I'd been 5, standing proudly in front of the original store, wearing a tiny apron with Daddy's helper embroidered on it. The crowd outside had grown. I spotted familiar faces, loyal customers, local business owners, even some of my former colleagues from the bank who'd left after witnessing Victoria's meltdown. Michael from Risk Assessment had quit 2 months after me, tired of the corporate politics. Now he handled our books, bringing big bank expertise to our family business. At 9:58, I saw a familiar car pull into the parking lot. Victoria's daughter Sophia stepped out, looking different from the last time I'd seen her. Gone were the designer clothes and superior attitude. She walked hesitantly toward the entrance. Dad tensed beside me, but I touched his arm. "It's okay," I invited her. Sophia had reached out 3 months ago after Victoria's arrest. Her mother's schemes had left her jobless and humbled. She'd asked for a chance to apologize, to make amends. "Your mother," Dad began, "is not her daughter," I finished. "Remember what Mom used to say about second chances." He smiled slightly. "They have to be earned, not given." Sophia had earned hers, spending weekends helping us set up the store, learning the business from the ground up. Today she would start as our customer service manager, a real job, not the fancy title Victoria had promised her. At exactly 10 a.m., I unlocked the doors. The crowd streamed in, their excited chatter filling the space with energy. Local reporters covered the opening, not society columnists this time, but real journalists interested in a story of community and redemption. "Welcome to Bennett and Daughter," Dad and I said together, greeting each customer like family. By noon, we'd made our first 100 sales. By closing time, we'd exceeded our projected opening day revenue by 40%. but the numbers weren't what mattered most. What mattered was the moment a young girl walked in with her mother, pointed to my name on a sign, and said, "Look, Mom, a girl can run a store too." What mattered was seeing Dad in his element again, explaining the difference between Phillips and flathead screwdrivers to a first-time homeowner. What mattered was Sophia, helping an elderly customer find the right light bulbs, genuine smile replacing her old smirk. That evening, after the last customer left, Dad and I sat in the office, Mom's old desk between us, now holding both our computers. She would be proud, Dad said quietly, of both of us. I looked around at what we'd built from the ashes of Victoria's deception. You know what I think she'd be most proud of? What's that? That we proved success doesn't need schemes or fraud. Just honest work and real relationships. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Speaking of relationships, I got an interesting call yesterday from Margaret at the bank. I raised an eyebrow. Margaret had been my mentor before Victoria came along. The board is investigating all of Victoria's connections. Seemed she had quite a network of fraudulent loans. They're restructuring the entire commercial lending division. He paused. They want you back, as regional director. I thought about it for a moment, looking at our store, at the future we built. Tell them thank you, I said finally. But I'm exactly where I belong. Dad smiled, the proud smile I'd missed during Victoria's reign. Yes, you are. Later that night, as I was closing up, I found Victoria's wedding seating card, still tucked away in my desk drawer. Kitchen entrance. It read an elegant script. I smiled and dropped it in the shredder. Some things aren't worth keeping, even as reminders. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from the prosecutor handling Victoria's case, confirming my appointment to testify next week. But that was just details now. The real victory wasn't in Victoria's downfall or even in saving Dad from her schemes. The real victory was in proving that success doesn't need validation from socialites or approval from society pages. Sometimes it just needs a father and daughter who believe in each other, a community that stands together, and the courage to rebuild something honest from the wreckage of broken dreams. As I locked up for the night, I looked at our sign one more time. Bennett and Daughter Hardware and Home. No crystal chandeliers,